Then once we have reached that state, individually and hopefully also collectively, then of course it's important that we do not just stay in that state, but that is the state from which we need to act.
Yeah.
And it is through our actions, both individual actions, but also collective actions,
Yeah. Yeah.
that change will happen.
Great experience.
Yes, thank you.
These 2 days.
Yeah, that was...
Let's just maybe, if you still,
Sure.
what did you say? You have to leave at
12:30.
So we have an half hour.
Half an hour.
So that's just one roll of.
Okay, good.
Maybe we touch upon your books
Yeah,
for a
absolutely.
moment. I just got this yesterday, The World We Create. That's the new one.
Yes.
Very nice. I'm sure you're proud of this big child.
Yeah, that book took a long time to write. That's really, it's the latest, but it's also the one that I started the earliest. So that has been in the making for 10 years.
From God to Market.
Yeah. And you have this small we there.
Yeah.
And of course, we try to forget that most aspects of this world is actually human constructs. And we are making that. We are co-creating that. But we try to forget it. And 2 examples of human constructs that we think to not see as human constructs is of course God, but also the market.
Yeah, there's the famous painting I remembered upon.
Yeah.
And of the finger touch where life comes into the creation.
Yes.
Could also be an invisible hand. I think you're right about the invisible hand.
I'm also right about the invisible hand.
From a skeptical point of view.
From a skeptical point of view.
I just flipped through the contents because I just got it yesterday evening.
Well, it's just out. It came out this week in English. It's been out in Swedish for more than a year, but the English translation is out from last week. So
congratulations to the English translation. And this was the last one, and you sent it to me a couple of months ago, and you see it's well read and worked upon everywhere. The Nordic Secret,
which I have co-written together with
Lena,
my Danish friend, the Danish philosopher and author Lena Andersen.
Yeah. That was quite a tour through history, and nice because it touched upon many intellectuals who in one way or the other worked upon the concept of development and build on.
Yeah. And co-creation of society. We might say. So the Nordic Secret is really revealing what we think is a forgotten but very important explanation to why the Nordic countries were able to actually co-create these very stable, industrial, happy, rich democracies from a starting point.
And thrive economically.
Yeah, thrive economically.
In the course of doing that.
Yeah, and thrive economically in the course of doing that. When these countries were really starting out 150 years ago only as the poorest, non-democratic, agricultural societies of Europe. So that was the secret there. So
that is the secret, and it's amazing. I really enjoyed reading the book. It was almost like a crime story. Like it was really sort of. I didn't expect that, to be honest. When I saw the book, I was going like, okay, this is sort of a historical background check on what was happening in Scandinavia. But reading it the way it was written was really inspiring for me, and for me especially nice because I've been one of the last students in Germany who profited from the sort of Humboldt ideal of Bildung in university. So my time at university was a time of self-development and not of education. And I think that's too loud. And I'm really happy that I profited from the system. And now we have education in Germany as well, everywhere at universities, and well, and I love that you bring this subject of building.
Yes.
Back.
Shall I tell you the secret?
Yeah, please. Tell me the secret.
Okay. So how did we manage to have this sort of transition, societal transition, so rapidly going from a pre-modern poor countries into rich modern countries? And that was due to the fact that leading intellectuals and politicians in all the Nordic countries 150 years ago were very well aware of the importance of interpersonal development when it comes to societal transitions. So they all knew that society was going to change. They knew that industrialization was coming, urbanization was coming, that was going to be turbulent times in society, and they knew that in times of rapid transition it's just so natural for us humans to want to find some external authority to hold on to, like a dogmatic religion or an authoritarian leader. But they didn't want to be authoritarian leaders. They were so committed to building strong democracies. And they knew that the only way to build strong democracies are from bottom up. And in order to do that, you need a sufficient amount of people in your country who can act as conscious co-creators of democracy. And in order to do that, you need to have people who have internalized the locus of control, found their inner moral compass, and not relying on external authority. And that process today, developmental psychologists would call that you develop a self-authoring capacity.
So that's Keegan's model of self-development. You explore it in here as well, and you make the connection between self-development by Keegan and others on the one hand side, and the older concept of Bildung on the other side.
Yes, because that is sort of, if you ask the question, so where did these intellectuals and politicians get this understanding of the importance of the inner development? And they got that from the German idealist philosophers that you are referring to, the Bildung philosophers. Philosophers like Schiller, Goethe, Herder, von Humboldt, von Humboldt University, and perhaps even Hegel. And back then, German was the academic language in Scandinavia. So all these intellectuals and politicians, they were reading these philosophers
and they picked up on that as well.
In original. And these idealist philosophers, they all reacted against the Enlightenment philosophers' view of our mind as a rational machine. This homo economicus that we have in the economic thinking today, that our mind should be sort of ready when the brain has stopped growing and we are 20 years of age. No, they say that our mind is a constantly evolving complex system, and that this evolution of our mind that goes on and can go on throughout life, they use the German word of Bildung, which in English would be something in between.
It's really difficult to translate.
It's somewhere between formation and flourishing, and growth.
So it's not education and training, but it's sort of self-development and self-flourishing and
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that Schiller, particularly, he wrote about the French Revolution, and these philosophers were living through the French Revolution, and they were putting so much hope on the revolution that this would bring the new society. But it turned out that people just wanted to have authoritarian leaders. First they wanted Robespierre, and then Napoleon. And
maybe
why did this
similar as today, isn't it?
So Schiller's conclusion was that in order for democracy to flourish, you need to have a sufficient amount of people having internalized the locus of control, relying on their inner compass to be self-authoring.
And then you had people in Scandinavia who put it into programs.
Yeah, and how did they do that?
Of Volksbildung.
Yeah. And you read the book, so you know that they started what I sometimes jokingly call retreat centers. They started small centers where around 20, 40, 50 people, often out in nature, could go into a retreat for 6 months to really be able to work on their personal development. And by the turn of the last century, year 1900, there were 100 centers like this in Denmark alone, 75 in Norway, and 150 where young adults could spend later on with state subsidy up to 6 months to really find themselves and to get the tools to become active co-creators of democracy. And when this was at its height, 10% of each young generation participated in one of these half-year programs. And of course, that created a critical mass in society to really be able to co-create modernity.
Let me just point on something else, because I found it really interesting, and the way you worked it out in this book is that you say they became co-creators of democracy, which at that time was you could say maybe a new way of society to govern itself.
Absolutely, it was.
But it was also closely connected to nationalism.
It was.
In a different way than we would talk maybe about nationalism today, or you make distinction between nationalism and I think I was a national chauvinism or something, I can't remember quite anymore. And I was thinking the whole time, if it's so important that a society gets or develops an understanding of their identity as a collective, and if this is closely knitted to their own self-development and the development of their society towards a better way of governance, and if that apply to today, and you even touch upon this as well in the end of the book, like what would that mean in terms of a global society?
So in the book, Lena and I, we talk about what we call circles of belonging. So just as we can evolve our conscious understanding through Bildung, through ego development, to be able to see more depth and complexity, to make sense of the world in a deeper way as we mature. In the same way we can develop our compassion and we can extend the circles of belonging. And as young we belong to a family, and then we grow out. And when the concept of Volksbildung was introduced in Denmark, the important step then was to help people to stop just identifying with their village and actually increase their circle of belonging to include the whole of Denmark. Later on, and especially in Sweden, this extended once you have come to embrace the larger circle of your nation, to go on and become international and try to become a world citizen. And I think one thing that developmental psychologists points out today is that it's difficult to skip these steps.
Mm-hmm.
You need to expand your circle step by step.
Yeah.
Because if you are not secure in your family, you will not all of a sudden become a secure and comfortable world citizen. So it goes in steps. And today I would say that perhaps a Folkbildung 3.0 that we are talking about in the last chapters would be concentrating on bringing together here in Europe a feeling for Europe.
Yeah.
Why do we belong together? Why should we even talk about the European project?
Yeah.
And understand that is at the bottom not an economic project, but it's a matter of peace.
Mm-hmm.
Because in Europe we've been killing each other for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Mm-hmm.
And now through bringing together Europe as a first step of bringing together the world, but that is really a peace project.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can not just understand this cognitively, but also emotionally and in an embodied way, which building is. Building is an embodied
way
of process. Then we wouldn't have such stupid situations as Brexit, because we would feel a belonging. At the same time, one of the reasons why the referendum turned out to a no. And I would even say that why did Trump win the election?
Yeah.
Is because, can I say, we liberals, globalists, have not really understood the need that we all have to belong.
For an identity.
For an identity and belong. And if we just think that people can just become globalists, and those that are not there, that are not on that level, if we call them the deplorables, that's not helpful.
No, that's
okay.
Not
So we need to meet everyone where they are and see their needs for belonging, to belong in the family, to belong in the local culture, to have the roots. And if we make sure that we develop our local roots well, then we can flourish as global citizens. But we need both, and that is also part of the building.
Here it is. And in a way, it's difficult to say, because it's not about a global building a global sort of national identity, it's a global identity.
But you need the local roots at the same
with
way.
Local roots, and thus
and the local history. And even if you are a digital nomad, you still have your own personal history. You still have your own personal roots. You still have a mother language. You still have a history that you belong to, and you need to feel that.
And there's a very strong and important, but also fragile and dangerous theme in that, because I just remember that a year ago Alexander Gauland, which is the leader of the sort of National Populist Party in Germany, had a speech at Parliament, and it was more or less exactly the same speech as Hitler had given, I don't know when, in front of some workers in a factory, and both speeches touched exactly upon this point of the global elites traveling the world, feeling themselves only committed to the global, and on the other hand, the ordinary man, the worker, who can only identify with his nation because he doesn't have the means and the education and the resources to travel globally and to connect globally, etc. He doesn't speak other languages and so on.
And this is a dangerous political development, because playing on both our need to belong, which is a strong need, and on our fears about the turbulent future, it's very, very, very strong. So I think, but then neglecting those concerns
Yeah.
is equally dangerous.
It is.
So we need to meet everyone in their fears and their need for belonging, but have a clear story that we need the local belonging to be able to embrace the world. So that there is no contrast.
And we just try to draw this together to sort of final finishing lines of thoughts, and maybe we can later on in another shooting or video ponder upon that more. We're now here in Kyiv, in the Ukraine. It is a hard border with a sort of, a military conflict around it between Europe, the West, whatever you might want to call it, Russia. There are threats, there is disinformation campaigns here. The Ukrainian participants of the Emerge Gathering talked about all these fake news campaigns from both sides. For ones, the Ukrainian people are fascist, for others they're communists. Some say they are drawn towards Russia, others. So it's a very special place here.
And that's why we are here.
Yeah, that's why we're here.
This is borderland
I wonder,
in many respects.
From sitting here in Kyiv at this moment in time in history, having an Emerge Gathering here, pondering about ideas of how could we root ourselves in our different circles of identity, but still let a sort of global consciousness emerge from which we can govern ourselves as a global society, which we have to do.
In certain questions,
like if you look at climate change or plastic in the oceans, these are questions we will never solve on a national level. They just require global identity, global commitment, global responsibility, and global governance. And maybe just some last thoughts, like, do we have already clues how a co-creative global governance could look like? Like, if we learn from the experiences of sort of nation building and self-development, what can we learn from that for what we have to do now?
I don't think we have any roadmap for the next transition, because the transition that we described in the Nordic Secret was, of course, from the pre-modern to the modern society.
And we can look back
now we are,
and see what...
Now we are going through a sort of a post-modern breakdown of modernity, and we might be looking into a new society, if we call it a meta-modern society or a post-modern society or whatever. We don't have a roadmap for that transition. We should definitely not try to extrapolate from the modern map. The modern map would be a democratically elected world government that would issue legally binding laws
something
for
like the
everyone.
United Nations. We've tried that already.
That will not work. That will not work. So it's about governance structure on many levels. And realizing that in many instances today the national level is a too large level. So we need more independent cities even. But for some questions we need a broader frame. So what could that system look like? I don't think we know. One clue might be that the technological development that we will be seeing in the next 5-10 years, blockchain for example and similar things, could help us to reinvent both the market and our governance systems, so that we, through a much richer information exchange, could gather more collective intelligence and make both the market and the democracy wiser. The reason why we boil everything down in the market to one price is because it was difficult 500 years ago to transmit a lot of information, and that was a very efficient way of doing it, but we lost a lot of information. For example, the information about the impact on the environment. The same for democracy. The only way to do this 100 years ago was for the people in the far out in the country to elect one representative who would travel on horseback to the capital, to sit in the parliament for a couple of months and make decisions on behalf of these people. Okay, this was the best we could do 500 years ago, 200 years ago, 100 years ago. But now, what is the new technological development enabling us to invent in these respects? And I think we only see the beginning, but the development on this side is going so rapidly. So I think that what we really need to do is to keep a close eye on the technological development and even influence the technological development and marry that to a deep understanding of what it means to be human and the development for human inner development, and that we make sure through Bildung and adult development that our inner complexity somehow matches the increasing outer complexity, and that these somehow can
so
give
in a
birth
way
to
there
something.
still is some pattern we can learn from.
Yes.
From the Bildung.
From the last transition, that we can learn. That going into a more complex society requires us to be able as humans to make meaning on a more complex, deeper way, but also requires us to be able to relate to each other in a deeper way.
There's this nice notion of the Bildungsreise, where just young intellectuals from the aristocracy at that time, before modernity, went to travel to see the world, which was Europe basically. So Goethe went to Italy and so on, to do a road trip of self-development, we would say today in cinema.
And the expressed understanding was that by doing that, by immersing yourself in foreign cultures, and we should remember back then Italy was a completely different country than Germany, completely different. So by immersing yourself in a completely different culture, you get more perspectives on the world. And by having the conflict of these perspectives, these multicultural perspectives, your mind grows.
So maybe we should ponder about, think about how we could organize collective Bildungsreisen globally. To the inner and outer worlds of our...
And of course today, it's not enough to go to Italy. Today we have to go deep into the Amazonas or deep into Southeast Asia or Africa or somewhere, and really try to understand how you can look upon the world with completely different eyes.
And maybe even go deep into our personal and collective selves.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was good.
That was good.
Enjoyed that.
So did I.